Chapter 102. A Bunch of Cowards. Jin Zuyan thought for a moment before saying, "There will be a group of soldiers coming in the afternoon. If you want to leave with them, go to the clothing factory. We have cleared the zombies outside, so you can leave now." After he finished speaking, he turned to Jiao Lijai and said, "Aitg, let's check the other warehouses first." Since there were people inside, she also didn't want to break in forcefully. So Jiao Lijai nodded and walked to the next warehouse with him. Inside the warehouse, a woman looked at the middle-aged man who walked over from the door and asked, "Manager Wang, how is it? Who is he?" Manager Wang shook his head and replied, "I don't know, but he said that a group of soldiers will come this afternoon and that we must go to the clothing factory if we want to leave with them." "But there are a lot of monsters outside. How can we leave?" a young man asked with a deep frown. "He said that the monsters outside have been killed. If we want to leave, we must leave now," the middle-aged man said as he looked at the people in front of him. The group of people heard this and looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with fear and uncertainty. After they were trapped in the factory building and dormitories, they had run out of water. At that time, there were at least 1,000 survivors. Although they had food, without water, they wouldn't be able to survive for long. So, when it finally rained, they rushed out to get water to drink. Some knew they should boil the water first and warn the others, but people were desperate, and no one cared. Who knew that not long after, those who drank the rainwater or came into contact with it started developing high fevers. Before the night even passed, 80% of them had turned into monsters and started attacking others. Because of this, only 23 people managed to escape and hide in this warehouse. This warehouse was used to store cat litter, and there was no food at all. It had been days, and their bodies could no longer survive without food. Everyone understood that they had to go out to find food if they wanted to survive. But the terror of barely escaping the monsters was still fresh in their minds. So, no one dared to leave, and no one dared to take the risk. After a long silence, a young man suddenly stood up and said, "Uncle Wang, let me go out first. If I'm safe, you all can follow." When they heard this, they were surprised. Manager Wang looked at him for a moment before saying, "Xiao Lin, do you understand what you are saying? If you go out, you might die." "Uncle Wang, if we stay here, we will definitely die of starvation. But if we go out, we might still have a chance to survive. I'm young, and I run faster. If there are monsters outside, I can lure them away, then you all can run." The moment they heard this, their eyes flashed with joy. Although they felt sorry for him and thankful for his kindness and generosity, they didn't want to die. Since someone was willing to sacrifice his life to open the way for them to survive, they wouldn't refuse. After pretending to hesitate for a while, Manager Wang finally let out a long sigh and said, "Xiao Lin, thank you. We are indebted to you." When he heard this, Lin Fei knew they had agreed to his suggestion. He nodded and said, "Uncle Wang, I'm the youngest, so it's reasonable for me to go. But can you please give me the machete?" Hearing this, Manager Wang frowned. There was only one weapon, the machete in his hand. If he handed it over, would they still listen to him later? How could he control them without weapons? Seeing his hesitation, Lin Fei said, "Uncle Wang, you don't expect me to go out and face those monsters without a weapon, do you?" The moment he said this, the others chimed in. "Manager Wang, Xiao Lin is sacrificing his life for us. Just give him the weapon." "That's right. Even if he meets the monsters, if he has a weapon, he still has a chance to survive. But without a weapon, he would definitely die." "Manager Wang, you don't need the weapon. Why are you hesitating? Are you changing your mind now? If you won't give Xiao Lin the weapon, how about you go outside to check the situation instead?" As the words became more and more absurd, Manager Wang could only say, "How can that be? Of course, I hope Xiao Lin will survive. I'm just worried about him not being able to use the weapon and hurting himself." After saying this, he gritted his teeth and handed the machete to Lin Fei. Although he was unwilling, he had no other choice with so many people pressuring him. Lin Fei watched him with a smile. Reaching out, he waited patiently for the machete to be handed over. This old fox always relied on this weapon to intimidate others. Now that he has taken away his weapon, let's see how he acts like a boss again. The moment the machete was in his hand, he looked at everyone and said with reddened eyes, "Uncles, aunties, sister-in-law, brothers, thank you for your care all these years. I don't know if we will meet again. I only hope that all of you survive." When they heard his words, everyone was moved. The women shed tears, while the men looked at him with a mix of gratitude and helplessness. After saying his farewell, Lin Fei took a deep breath and walked toward the door as if heading toward certain death. He only opened a small crack and slipped out. Once outside, he quickly closed the door. The next moment, he heard the sound of locks and chains. He sneered and thought, they really are a bunch of cowards. Chapter 103, New Discoveries. Since they were willing to wait for death, he didn't bother to save them. With a machete in hand, Lin Fei walked toward the factory entrance. At this moment, his face was full of smiles, and his eyes were filled with hope. He dared to come out because he had heard the sound of an explosion just now. If what he heard was a battle, then that person's words were at least 60% true. With this possibility, he was willing to bet his life for a chance at survival. But he needed a weapon to protect himself. So, in order to get it, he had staged that sacrifice act. Now, everything was as he had predicted. The zombies had been cleared out, and he would be able to leave with the soldiers in the afternoon. All he needed to do was get to the neighboring clothing factory. After Lin Fei left, the group of people inside the warehouse waited anxiously. When they didn't hear any sound coming from outside, one of them said, "Manager Wang, it seems that there are indeed no more monsters outside. How about we go out and check the situation?" Hearing his suggestion, Manager Wang frowned and said, "We should wait a little bit longer. If in an hour there is no sound, we will leave this place and go to the neighboring factory." When they heard his words, everyone nodded. They were hoping that they could leave this place, so everyone was listening to the sound outside, and no one was talking. At the same time, Jiao Lijai and Jin Zuyan had already reached the other warehouses. Unlike the previous warehouse, which stored cat litter, this area had several warehouses that stored pet food and pet products such as brushes, towels, soaps, and other daily necessities. Since consuming pet food could cause liver and kidney damage, Jiao Lijai didn't bother to collect them. She only focused on taking items that could be used by humans. While she was collecting things into her space, Jin Zuyan went to check the emergency generator and found lots of solar panels installed on the warehouse's rooftop. Seeing the number of solar panels, the electricity they generated should be enough to supply a small hotel. Feeling excited by this discovery, he returned to the warehouse and said, "Aitg, come with me for a moment." Hearing his voice, Jiao Lijai walked out of the warehouse and asked, "Brother Yan, what's wrong?" "Aitg, I found lots of solar panels and several generators. We can use them to get electricity," Jin Zuyan said as he held her hand and led her to the nearby warehouse. He pointed at the rooftop and said, "It's installed there." Jiao Lijai nodded and looked at the surroundings, thinking about how to climb to the rooftop. Before she could find a way, her waist was hugged by Jin Zuyan, and in a moment, she saw the ground getting farther away. She looked at him in surprise. When they landed on the rooftop, she asked, "Brother Yan, what level are you at? How can you carry me and still be able to jump so high?" Jin Zuyan looked at her, and after he hesitated for a moment, said, "I'm at level 2. When she heard this, Jiao Lijai's eyes widened in shock. It had only been 1 week since the apocalypse. No matter how she thought about it, it was impossible for him to reach level 2 in just 1 week. She always thought that she was already defying nature's course by reaching level 1 in just 1 week. Unexpectedly, there was someone who was much more terrifying than her. Seeing her shock, Jin Zuyan felt uneasy. He didn't dare to meet her gaze and thought, "Did I scare her? I should have said I'm at level 1. Jin Zuyan, you are so stupid. What if Aitg becomes wary of me because of this? What should I do?" When Jiao Lijai saw his avoidance, she thought that as a reborner like herself, he might have brought back his ability. When she reached this conclusion, she asked, "Brother Yan, when did you return?" Hearing her question, Jin Zuyan was stunned for a moment before he understood her meaning and said, 3 years before the apocalypse. "Did you bring your ability with you when you came back?" she asked again. This time, Jin Zuyan nodded and replied without hesitation, "I did." After hearing his answer, Jiao Lijai nodded. Everything made sense now. If he had brought back his fire-type ability when he was reborn, it was possible for him to reach level 2 through daily training in 3 years. "How about you?" Jin Zuyan asked. "I came back on the day of the apocalypse," Jiao Lijai replied. Hearing this, Jin Zuyan muttered under his breath, "No wonder." Jiao Lijai looked at him and asked, "Brother Yan, what did you say?" Reaching out, Jin Zuyan patted her head and said with a smile, "Fortunately, you came back at the right time, and I was still able to find you." Before she could ask more questions, he said, "Aitg, should I disassemble the solar panels first before you store them?" Looking at the solar panels, Jiao Lijai shook her head and said, "No need. I can just store them like this. When you need them, I can just take them out and you don't have to assemble them again." "Okay." After their brief conversation, Jiao Lijai walked toward the solar panels, and with a wave of her hand, she stored the solar panels in her space. After she broke through to level 1, she could collect things into her space from a distance of 5 meters. When they were done taking away the solar panels, generators, and pet products, Jiao Lijai and Jin Zuyan returned to the first warehouse. Seeing the door was still locked, they looked at each other with doubts. This time, Jin Zuyan didn't knock and directly used his black flame to melt the chain and lock from the outside. Clang. Chapter 104, Trapped. The moment the chain and padlock fell to the ground with a loud sound, everyone inside the warehouse was startled. Seeing the door being pushed open, they stood up instantly. Manager Wang held an iron rod, pointed it at the newcomers, and shouted, "Stop right there." When they finally saw the newcomers, they were stunned by how good-looking the couple was. After a while, a young man asked, "Who are you?" Seeing how thin and haggard they were, Jin Zuyan asked, "Didn't I tell you that the zombies had been cleared outside? Why are you still here?" "How can we be sure that you are not lying to us?" Manager Wang asked. Hearing this, Jiao Lijai chuckled and asked him back, "What benefits do we get from lying to you?" She looked at him from head to toe and added, "Judging from your pale face, cracked lips, and hollow cheeks, you must not have eaten and drank for at least 3 days." When they heard her words, they were taken aback. "How did you know?" a middle-aged woman asked. "Auntie, everyone with eyes can see it. If you want to survive, you should leave this place," Jiao Lijai replied casually. When everyone heard her words, their hearts swayed, and they looked at Manager Wang. From the open door, they could see that there were no longer monsters wandering outside. Noticing their expressions, Manager Wang said, "Don't be fooled by them. They appeared out of nowhere. Who knows if they are the ones who released those monsters?" As soon as he finished his words, Jiao Lijai burst out laughing and said, "Uncle, you might not know, but those monsters are called zombies. And this situation didn't just happen here. Earth is no longer the same as before. I don't have the capability to cause a global attack." This time, everyone finally showed panic and fear. "Girl, are you telling the truth?" a middle-aged man asked. Jiao Lijai shrugged and said, "If you don't believe my words, just go out and see for yourself." "Oh, one more thing. Based on the current situation, if you don't go with the soldiers and join a temporary survivor camp, you might not be able to survive the next 2 weeks." "Girl, why do you say so?" the middle-aged man asked again. Jiao Lijai smiled sweetly, but her words were chilling. "Because Linen University has turned into a zombie den. This factory district is less than 50 kilometers away from Linen University. What do you think will happen if the zombies decide to find food?" she asked. As soon as she finished her words, the middle-aged man's body shook. After a moment of silence, he quickly grabbed his bag and said, "Manager Wang, if you want to stay, you can stay, but I don't want to die." After he finished his words, He rushed toward the door with a pale face. Seeing him running away, one after another, the people picked up their belongings and ran toward the door. Manager Wang was startled by their sudden action. Fearing that he would end up dying if he stayed here alone, he gritted his teeth and ran toward the door, trying to catch up with the group. After they left, Jin Zuyan asked, Aitg, why didn't you tell them to find Zhang Yuan and the rest? Even if you say so much to them, there is no guarantee that they will leave. Zhao Lijai smiled and explained, Brother Yan, if we tell them to find your team, they will demand a lot of things and take your team's kindness for granted. With them going by themselves, even if they end up following your team, they wouldn't dare to demand anything. After all, it's them who latched onto the team. I heard you say that you want to retire after Pei Yijun goes with another team. Since that's the case, we shouldn't put ourselves in a difficult situation. Jin Zuyan was surprised when he heard her words. He looked at her and asked, Aitg, when did you find out? When you talked to Pei Yijun. Ability users' 5 senses are better than ordinary people. I can hear your voice clearly, Zhao Lijai reminded him. Hearing this, Jin Zuyan laughed and said nothing. After the brief conversation, the two of them quickly go back to work. With him guarding the door, Zhao Lijai quickly collected all the cat litter in the warehouse. When they were done, the two of them went to clear some zombies to get the crystal cores. At the same time, the Eagle team was blocked by a group of zombies several kilometers away from their location. Trapped inside the car, one of the soldiers said, Captain, what should we do now? If we open the door, we will die for sure. Hearing this, Wei Wying narrowed his eyes. They could run over the zombies if the road wasn't blocked by cars. Unfortunately, the road was damaged and the abandoned cars blocked the road. They needed to remove the cars blocking the road first before they could continue their journey. But before they could even get out of the car, a group of zombies suddenly swarmed toward them. Roar! Bang, bangs, bang. The sound of zombies' roars coming from outside was accompanied by loud banging echoing inside the cars. At this moment, the only one who had a chance to make a breakthrough against this group of zombies was Wei Wying, who obtained abilities after catching a high fever. While he was still thinking about how to get out without endangering himself and his comrades, a fireball suddenly flew toward them at high speed. Boom! The moment the fireball hit the zombies, it exploded instantly. Due to the explosion, the car shook and the soldiers' ears were ringing. Before they could regain their senses, a young man ran over from the shop across the road. Holding an electric baton, he threw a ball of water at the zombies and struck them with the baton. Zip. Chapter 105, Shocking News. The moment the electric baton touched the water, the zombies were zapped by the electricity and stood unmoving with their mouths wide open. More your turn, the young man shouted as he ducked to the side. Boom. In a split second, another fireball flew from behind him and hit the zombies, blasting their heads. Black blood and rotten flesh splashed on the ground as the headless zombies fell with a thud. Inside the car, Wei Wying was surprised to see them and said, Go out and help them. Hearing his order, the soldiers quickly opened the doors and got out of the car. With the fireball blasting the zombies surrounding their cars, they finally found an opening. As soon as they came out, the soldiers raised their guns and started shooting at the zombies. Bang, bangs, bang. The soldiers cleared the zombies surrounding the cars so their comrades could get out, with more soldiers joining the fight. Rongmore and Gu Sheaz were finally able to catch their breaths. But due to the sound of gunshot, more zombies came toward their direction. Seeing this, Wei Wying said, Divide the group into 2. One group cleared the road as soon as possible. The rest continue clearing the zombies. Yes, Captain. As soon as they received their orders, the soldiers quickly went into their formation. After blasting the zombies' heads using 5 fireballs, Rongmore felt her energy depleted and said, I will go help clear the road. Hearing this, Gu Sheaz nodded and said, I will come with you. As ability users, Their strength and stamina were above the trained soldiers. The two of them put their hands on the side of a bus and pushed it together. It. When the soldiers saw the two of them were able to move the heavy bus, they were shocked. They planned to move the smaller cars and ignore the bus. Since it was too heavy, it would take longer time and more energy to move it from the road. Unexpectedly, these two youngsters were able to move it with bare hands. While they were busy clearing the road, Wei Wying and the rest of the soldiers were being pressured by the zombies. Bang, bangs, bang. Before, they were able to kill the zombies with one headshot, but now it was hard to aim at the head as the zombies were more agile and faster than before. To take down a zombie, they needed at least 3 to 5 bullets, which drained their ammunition faster than before. As the soldiers changed their drum magazines, one of them shouted, "Captain, we will run out of ammo at this rate." Wei Wying looked at the number of zombies rushing from every direction, turned his head, and asked, "Are the roads clear now?" Behind them, another group of soldiers, with the help of Rong Moore and Gu Sheaz, finally managed to move the cars and big boulders blocking the road. The soldiers quickly joined the team to kill the zombies, while some of them went to drive the cars. "Captain, it's done," one of the soldiers said as he drove the car in their direction. Seeing this, Wei Wying said, "Get into the car." The soldiers moved backward while continuing to kill the zombies. When most of them had already entered the car, Wei Wying said, "Civilians, get in the car." Gu Sheaz heard this and quickly pulled Rong Moore as he said, "Let's go." As soon as they got into the car, the soldiers closed the door and drove away. Seeing that their captain was still covering the rear, one of the soldiers shouted, "Captain." Wei Wying observed the situation and said, "Go, I will catch up soon." The rest of the soldiers could only grit their teeth, close the door, and drive away. A few minutes later, Wei Wying saw that the cars were already in the distance. He pulled out the grenades from his pocket, pulled the pins, threw them at the zombies' crowd, turned around, and ran in the car's direction. The moment his feet stepped on the ground, it cracked, and in a blink of an eye, he was already 10 meters away from his previous location. Boom, boom, boom. A few seconds passed, and a series of explosions echoed in the area. Due to the loud sound, the zombies were attracted to the explosion site. Inside the car, the soldiers opened the window to check the situation. When they saw that their captain was nowhere to be seen, their eyes turned red, thinking he had sacrificed himself to save them. But before their tears could fall, they saw a blurred image of someone behind the car. When Gu Sheaz saw the person, he said, "That's the captain." As soon as they heard this, one of the cars stopped, and the soldier opened the door. Not long after, they saw their captain running after them and shouted, "Captain." Wei Wying quickly climbed into the car and closed the door while saying, "Let's go." The soldier driving the car stepped on the pedal while saying, "Captain, you are alive." Noticing his soldier's reddened eyes, Wei Wying chuckled and replied, "I won't die that easily." After he caught his breath, he turned to look at the young couple and said, "Comrades, thank you for helping us. We are the Eagle team. I'm Wei Wying, the captain. May I know your names?" "Hello, Captain Wei. I'm Gu Sheaz and she is Rong Moore. Both of us are students of Linen University." When he heard this, Wei Wying was taken aback and said, "I got information that Linen University has turned into a zombie den. How did the two of you escape?" Rong Moore was surprised by this news and said with disbelief, "Sheaz and I left the university after the rain stopped. We did hear roars of zombies not far from the university, but we didn't see many zombies. How can it turn into a zombie den suddenly?" Chapter 106, Speed Type Ability User. Wei Wying shook his head and replied, "We don't have detailed information about that for now. If you don't have any destination, you can follow us back to the temporary survivor camp." Hearing this, Rong Moore glanced at Gu Sheaz and saw him nod. Since they didn't know the current situation, it was better to follow these soldiers and gather more information first. When they had a better understanding, they could plan their route to find their families. "Thank you, Captain Wei," Rong Moore said. After a moment of silence, Wei Wying said, I saw that the two of you could summon a fireball and a water ball before. What is that? Gu Sheaz observed his expression for a moment before he said, Captain Wei, you also awakened your superpower. If I'm not wrong, you should have a speed-type power. Hearing this, Wei Wying nodded and said, I did become faster and stronger than before after I recovered from a high fever. Captain Wei, from what we know, that superpower is called an ability. Those who awaken their abilities are called ability users. Both Moore and I are ability users. I have a water-type ability, while Moore has a fire-type ability, Gu Sheaz explained. When the soldiers heard this, their eyes widened in surprise. One of them looked at their captain and said excitedly, Captain, you are also an ability user. Wei Wying frowned and asked, Did the two of you feel any changes in your body after you awakened your ability? Besides having our 5 senses improve, our stamina is much better than before, Moore replied after thinking for a moment. Noticing Wei Wying's frown, Gu Sheaz asked, Captain Wei, are you having other symptoms? Wei Wying hesitated for a moment before he nodded and said, After I got my ability, I could crush a metal pole with my bare hand. As soon as he said this, both Gu Sheaz and Moore looked at each other. His strength sounded so similar to Teacher Cao and Li Yang's power-type ability. Captain Wei, perhaps you also gained a power-type ability. We met 2 people who awakened power-type abilities, and they could blast a zombie's head with a punch. Have you tested the limit of your strength? Gu Sheaz asked. Wei Wying shook his head and said, I haven't tested it. I only tried my speed, and so far my running speed is around 80 km/h. When they heard this, everyone was shocked. His speed was as fast as a car. Captain Wei, I think you can try to kill a zombie with your bare hands and see if you really awakened a power-type ability. If you did, you might be the first dual ability user, Moore suggested. After hearing her words, Wei Wying nodded and said, I will try it later. After fighting against the zombies several times, he understood that the zombies were getting stronger, and soon, they wouldn't be able to kill them using their guns. They needed to find a new way to kill the zombies. If he could kill them with his bare hands, then he could increase his team's chance of survival. While the Eagle team was moving toward the factory district, Zhang Yuan was looking at a new group of survivors. Standing in front of them, he said, Everyone needs to undergo an inspection to check if you have a wound or not. If you don't want to be checked, you can wait for 2 hours before you can join the rest of the survivors. Hearing this, Manager Wang said, Comrade, we were told by someone that the soldiers would come to pick us up. We don't have any wounds, so why do we need to be checked or wait for 2 hours? These are the rules. If you don't want to follow the rules, you can choose to leave, Zhang Yuan replied. When they heard his words, a middle-aged woman said, Comrade, you are a soldier. It's your duty to protect us. How can you chase us away? That's right, we pay for your salary, you should serve us, another woman added. Zhang Yuan frowned when he heard their words. It was as Qin Luzi had said before. As it turns out, these civilians were not as good as he had thought. They were unreasonable and selfish. Finally seeing the ugly truth, he hardened his heart and said, Comrade, you didn't pay for my salary. I use my life to earn my salary. I protect this country and its people. But it doesn't mean that you can order me around. Either follow the rules or leave. It's your choice, he added coldly. Seeing that he couldn't be threatened or persuaded, the group of survivors became angry and annoyed. Manager Wang looked at the group of people who were eating in the distance and felt his mouth water. He was hungry and no longer had the mind to play the victim. After considering the pros and cons, he said, Comrade, I agree to be checked. When the group heard his words, they were surprised. It was his idea to show their firm attitude so they could receive more benefits. After they offended the soldiers, he changed his stance and agreed to the rules. Was he using them as stepping stones? As this thought flashed through their minds, their anger was no longer directed at Zhang Yuan and his team. Instead, it was directed at Manager Wang. Zhang Yuan didn't care about their emotions or thoughts. When he heard that the old man agreed to be checked, he gestured to the soldiers to do the inspection. Manager Wang was taken to the temporary metal partition and asked to undress. With only his underwear left, his body was carefully checked by the soldiers. He felt embarrassed and humiliated, but for food and water, he would endure it. 10 minutes later, he came out, and one of the soldiers said, "Vice Captain, he's good to go." Zhang Yuan nodded and said, "You can go in to get your food and water." Chapter 107, Metal-Type Mutant Zombie, 1. The moment he heard Zhang Yuan's words, all the anger and humiliation Manager Wang had felt before disappeared. He quickly bowed to them and said, "Thank you, comrade." After he joined the other survivors, Zhang Yuan looked at the group in front of him and asked, "How about you all?" Everyone hesitated for a while, but finally agreed to abide by the rules. Since there were no female soldiers, the women could only wait for 2 hours, while the men all agreed to be checked. Seeing that the group of survivors had increased in number, Chu Zhimiao sighed and said, "I never expected these soldiers would share their supplies with those people. If this continues, their supplies may not last even a week." Hearing this, Han Jai said, "It's their duty, so it's normal for them to share their supplies." When Li Yang heard this, he shook his head and said, "Han Jai, now it's not the same as before. We don't even know if the higher-ups in the government are still human or if they have already turned into zombies. Without commands from the higher-ups and without communication, who can control them? If they decide to never go back to report to the military, no one would be able to force them. Those supplies were found by them, and by rights, they belong to them. Sharing their supplies with the survivors was out of kindness and maybe from habit due to their job. But if they didn't want to share, who could blame them?" After he said these words, Han Jai went silent. Although he still thought that the soldiers should sacrifice themselves to protect the country and the people, he couldn't refute Li Yang's words. While the soldiers were busy managing the survivors and distributing the supplies, Jin Zuyan and Jiao Lijai were fighting against 2 level 2 zombies in the seed factory. Boom! A fireball the size of a yoga balloon exploded the moment it collided with several water arrows. The water extinguished the fireball, and at the same time the water arrows turned into water vapor, rising in the air. Seeing that the fire-type zombie was suppressing Jiao Lijai's attacks, Jin Zuyan said, "Ah Zhai, let's exchange opponents." Crack, boom. As soon as he said this, a thunderbolt fell from the sky. Feeling the energy fluctuation in the air, he dodged to the side a moment before he was struck by the thunderbolt. Seeing the deep cracks on the ground, Jin Zuyan's eyes turned cold. Noticing that the zombie was preparing another attack, the 2 of them exchanged gazes and dashed in opposite directions. As the fire-type zombie opened its mouth, another fireball flew at them at high speed. Holding onto his longsword, Jin Zuyan swung it vertically. Whoosh, boom, boom. The fireball was cut in half by his sword, flying toward the sides and exploding upon contact with the wall. Due to the smaller size of the fireball, the wall was not destroyed, only leaving a hole the size of a watermelon. Jin Zuyan sent his energy into his sword, and a black flame instantly covered the blade. As he swung his sword, aiming at the zombie's neck, it raised its hand and created a firewall to block his attack. Boom! The energy wave from the collision created a strong gust of wind, sending debris and dust flying. At the same time, Jiao Lijai swung her hand, and several water blades flew toward the thunder-type zombie at high speed. The moment she sent her attack, she held her dagger and followed closely behind the water blades. Seeing the incoming water blades, the thunder-type zombie raised its hand and swung it down. Crack! Hearing the crackling of thunder, Jiao Lijai waved her hands, and her water blades made a sharp turn, flying upward instantly. Boom! The moment the water blades met the thunderbolts, they absorbed the electricity and spun faster. At the same time, Jiao Lijai had already appeared in front of the zombie. With one hand controlling the water blades, she swung her dagger at the zombie's neck. Before the dagger could chop off its head, the zombie leaned back and dodged the attack. Seeing this, Jiao Lijai's eyes flashed with surprise. Without giving it a chance to counterattack, she flicked her wrist and changed her dagger's direction. As she swung her hand down, the zombie felt danger. Slash. As the zombie jumped back, her dagger cut its chest open. Black blood spurted out and stained the ground. Roar. The zombie let out an angry roar as it saw the wound on its body. Jiao Lijai smiled and said, "It's not over yet." Crash, crash. As soon as she finished her words, the water blades flew from behind the zombie and chopped off its arms at the forearm. Arar. This time, the zombie's black eyes glowed with an eerie red light as it stared at Jiao Lijai after it let out a loud roar. Bending its body, the zombie dashed toward her with its mouth wide open. Seeing this, Jiao Lijai bent her knees and jumped, barely dodging the zombie's attack. Before she could land on the ground, she saw a fireball flying toward her. Aitg, be careful. Boom, duog. The moment she heard Jin Zuyan's voice, the fireball had already hit her body. She flew several meters from the impact and collided with a building. As her body slid down the wall, she coughed out a mouthful of blood. Cough, cough. Seeing this, Jin Zuyan's pupils turned red, and the black flames covering his longsword ignited suddenly, as if doused with gasoline. Roar. The fire-type zombie let out a roar while sending 2 fireballs aimed at his back. Jiao Lijai raised her head and saw the attack. Her eyes flickered as she shouted, "Brother Yan." She thought he would be wounded by the fireballs. Unexpectedly, before they could touch him, he swung his sword horizontally, and a crescent-shaped fire blade flew toward them. Boom. Chapter 108, Metal-type Mutant Zombie 2. The moment the fire blade met the fireballs, the black flames absorbed them while continuing toward the fire-type zombie at high speed. The zombie saw the incoming attack and jumped to the side, dodging it. But before it could land on the ground, Jin Zuyan had already appeared behind it. With a swing of his longsword vertically, the zombie was split in half. Black blood and rotten matter splashed on his clothes, yet his red eyes were cold, and his face was expressionless. He turned his head and dashed toward the Thunder-type zombie. Roarer! The Thunder-type zombie faced him and let out a roar, sensing the crisis approaching. Jiao Lijai pushed herself up from the ground and threw several water arrows at the back of the Thunder-type zombie, attempting for a sneak attack. Boom! Before her water arrows could hit the zombie, a fireball struck it. The next moment, the zombie was covered in black flames and thrashed on the ground. The temperature of the surrounding area rose sharply, forcing Jiao Lijai to summon a water barrier as she backed away. Her water arrows had turned into water vapor due to the high temperature when she landed. Just after the zombie turned to ashes, a blurred shadow suddenly appeared behind her. Before her mind could react, her body had already conjured a water shield instinctively. Duog, crack. Ack. Her back was kicked, and she flew away as the water shield shattered due to the impact. This time, she didn't hit the wall or fall to the ground, as a pair of strong arms wrapped around her waist and caught her. Jin Zuyan used his body as her cushion and fell to the ground with a loud thud. When he landed, he lowered his head and saw his Aitg coughing blood. The anger and madness he had been suppressing exploded at the sight of her wounded body. Aitg, how are you? He asked tremblingly. Jiao Lijai felt as if her organs were shattered and coughed out another mouthful of blood. At this moment, she didn't notice the strangeness of the man holding her. Her only focus was taking out a bottle of pond water and drinking it. As the warm energy entered her body, the pain lessened, and she took a deep breath. Seeing that her face had finally regained some color, Jin Zuyan's eyes flashed with surprise. He glanced at the empty bottle thoughtfully. After confirming she was no longer in danger, he put her down and said, Aitg, be good and wait here. I will take care of the rest. Jiao Lijai knew that with her current condition, she would only drag him down. So she nodded and said hoarsely, Brother Yan, be careful. Jin Zuyan nodded and turned around. When he saw the little boy standing 15 meters away from them, he narrowed his eyes. If not for the boy's all-black eyes and the bluish skin on his body, no one would associate him with a zombie. But compared to adult zombies, children who turned into zombies were even more dangerous. The zombie boy looked at him with its black eyes and grinned. As his lips parted, his cheek tore, revealing the sharp teeth inside. His face split open as the tear reached his ears. Seeing this, Jin Zuyan muttered, "A level 3 zombie." Logically, the chance of a boy appearing in the factory was almost 0. So the appearance of this zombie boy was an anomaly. What's more, based on how neat his clothes were, it didn't seem as if he had mutated from being bitten by zombies or drenched by the rain. When he thought of this, his eyes flickered for a moment as a figure appeared in his mind. He tightened his grip on the longsword to control his emotions. After a moment, he calmed down, but the coldness in his eyes intensified. He bent his knees and dashed toward the zombie. As he swung his longsword, the zombie raised its hands. Clang! Seeing the metal covering the zombie's arms, Jin Zuyan sent his energy into his longsword. The black flame intensified and slowly melted the metal arms. The zombie's eyes glinted for a moment before it pushed its arms forward and sent a kick aimed at Jin Zuyan's chest. Seeing the incoming attack, he raised his leg and blocked the kick. Duog. If other ability users had been kicked by the zombie, their bones would have been broken. But for someone at his level, this attack was painful but not enough to break his bones. After its kick was blocked, the zombie sent a series of punches aimed at Jin Zuyan. This time, he didn't block the attack but leaped back. The moment he landed on the ground, he sheathed his longsword and raised his hands. This time, instead of fireballs, 2 fire dragons appeared from his palms and flew toward the zombie. Sensing the danger of the attack, the zombie dodged left and right. But with the fire dragons connected to Jin Zuyan's palms, he could control their movements. No matter where the zombie escaped to, the fire dragons followed closely. After 5 minutes of running and chasing, an ice wall suddenly appeared in front of the zombie. Boom, boom. With its path blocked, the zombie couldn't escape and was devoured by the fire dragons. Aroyarar. Unlike usual, it took less than a minute for Jin Zuyan's black flame to turn the zombie into a pile of ashes. With a wave of his hand, the black fire flew toward the fire-type zombie's corpse and burned it to ashes. After absorbing the black flame back into his body, he felt a throbbing pain in his mind. Feeling the energy went out of control again, he sat down and regulated his energy with a pale face. In the distance, Jiao Lijai stood up after drinking 3 bottles of pond water. The ice wall consumes the last bit of her energy. Standing there, she looked at his back thoughtfully. Chapter 109, A New Setting Panel 1. The power Jin Zuyan had just displayed was no longer at a level 2 ability user's level. Based on how at ease he had been while fighting against that level 3 mutant zombie, his level was at least 4, if not higher. Seeing that he was regulating his energy, Jiao Lijai didn't disturb him and went to collect the crystal cores. Both of them had already guessed that there was a level 3 zombie nearby when they saw 2 level 2 zombies partnering up to fight them. Without the control of a higher-level zombie, 2 zombies at the same level would have killed each other instead of teaming up. She had simply underestimated the enemy and was injured. This lesson snapped her back from her arrogance. Even if she was reborn and stronger than other ability users, she was still weaker than the zombies. For an unknown reason, the zombies were evolving faster than in her previous life. She needed to be more careful, keep her head cool, and remain humble in the future. Jiao Lijai checked the surroundings for a while. When she was sure that there were no other zombies around, she took out 2 bottles of pond water from her space and walked toward Jin Zuyan. She didn't disturb him and stood beside him to guard him. Feeling hungry, she took out a loaf of raisin bread and a pack of cheddar cheese. While guarding Jin Zuyan, she sat in front of him and ate slowly. 30 minutes later, Jin Zuyan opened his eyes and saw Jiao Lijai sitting in front of him while filling an empty water bottle. Seeing him finally open his eyes, Jiao Lijai handed him 2 bottles of pond water and said, "Brother Yan, drink some water." When he heard this, Jin Zuyan found her behavior very cute. Maybe because she was a water-type ability user, she liked to offer water to others. Reaching out, he accepted the water and opened the cap. He finished the water in several gulps before asking, "Zhai, are you okay?" Jiao Lijai nodded and replied, "Brother Yan, I'm fine. It's you who are full of injuries. Should we return first and come back tomorrow with your team?" After absorbing the cold energy, Jin Zuyan's body had long recovered from the injuries. He shook his head and stood up while saying, "I'm fine, it's just small injuries. We should go get the seeds first." Jiao Lijai observed him for a moment and asked, "Brother Yan, are you really all right?" Jin Zuyan chuckled, reached out to pull her up and said, "I'm really all right. Let's get the seeds before dark." Since he seemed all right, Jiao Lijai no longer asked about his condition and followed him. The 2 of them had been fighting for a long time and felt tired. So they didn't go to the dormitories to clear the zombies but went directly to the warehouse. Unlike other factories, besides the warehouse storing seeds, there were several fields where seedlings were cultivated. It was rare for soil to be free from the zombie virus after the apocalypse, so the chance of the seedlings being free from the virus was near 0. But Jiao Lijai's space had the ability to absorb the zombie virus. Although she didn't know if the polluted seedlings could be purified by her space, she still wanted to give it a try. So when they walked past the fields, she said, "Brother Yan, let's go check the seedlings." Jin Zuyan didn't know that her space could be used to plant and raise animals. He thought that she wanted to preserve some plant seedlings, so he readily agreed, "Okay." Using his black flame, he melted the lock on the gate, and the 2 of them entered the field. According to their previous life experiences, mutant animals and mutant plants only appeared a few months after the apocalypse. So the 2 of them were not worried that they would be attacked by a mutant plant. As soon as they entered the field, they saw wilted seedlings with some seedlings full of vitality mixed in between. In contrast to the wilting seedlings, the green ones gave off a strange, eerie feeling to both of them. They exchanged glances, and Jin Zuyan said, "Zhai, I think we should burn these seedlings just in case they mutate and harm people." In their previous life, Linen City got an S rank on the danger board, not solely because of the zombies, but also due to the rampaging mutant plants and mutant animals. While the mutant plants didn't discriminate between zombies and humans, they couldn't move freely. Therefore, most of the city still became a zombie's den. But the most dangerous area is the place occupied by mutant plants. Jiao Lijai didn't know whether these mutated plants would be edible or not, but she wanted to test if her space could purify them. So she thought for a moment and said, "Brother Yan, I still want to take some back. If they turn into inedible mutated plants, we can still use them for research purposes." Hearing her reasoning, Jin Zuyan said, "If that's what you want, then we will take them." Jiao Lijai nodded and went to the closest green seedling. She didn't dare get too close and collected it from a distance. With a wave of her hand, the mutated plant disappeared from their sight and reappeared inside her space. After she collected the plant, she checked her space and saw that the plant not only didn't wither and die, but it also became more vibrant. The only difference between the mutated plant in her space and the one in the field was that there were no dark red veins on the stems and leaves. With this discovery, she smiled and quickly collected the rest of the mutated plants. Jin Zuyan was not worried that the mutated plants she collected would harm her. After all, everything stored in the space of a space-type ability user would freeze in time. Chapter 110, A New Setting Panel 2. What's more, no living organisms could be stored in the space of an ability user. So, the chance of the mutated plants harming her was near 0. After they were done collecting the seedlings in these fields, they went to other fields and collected the rest of the mutated plants. From the total of 17 fields, she collected several types of fruit seedlings, such as apple, grape, strawberry, banana, peach, grapefruit, avocado, jackfruit, lemon, orange, coconut, olive, and sweet cherry. The number of seedlings varied from 1, such as avocado, to more than 20, such as strawberries. As for the other plants, they only found 1 chestnut tree, 2 walnut trees, 1 almond tree, and 2 chocolate trees. Besides the trees and fruits, she noticed 3 coffee plants in the last field, 1 Arabica coffee plant and 2 Robusta coffee plants. She didn't know their specific species, but it was already great that she could find so many mutated plants in this seed factory. In the future, she wouldn't have to worry about not having coffee to drink. After they got all the mutated seedlings, Jin Zuyan used his black flame and burned the rest of the plants. When they were done, the 2 of them went to the warehouse area. This time, the road to the warehouse was full of zombies. After drinking a bottle of pond water, the 2 of them had already regained their energy. It was great to be able to recover their energy by drinking pond water. The problem was that their urge to use the toilet was higher than usual. Before they began the fight, Zhao Lijai said, "Brother Yan, I need to use the toilet first." When he heard this, Jin Zuyan was stunned. His body metabolism was very high, and even after drinking so much water, he didn't feel the urge to use the toilet. But it was different for her. He looked around and found a patch of bushes not far from their location. Pointing at the bushes, he said, "Aitg, you can use that place. I won't look." Zhao Lijai was embarrassed, but she was already at her limit. So she nodded and quickly rushed to the bushes. The moment Jin Zuyan turned his body, she flashed into her space and used the toilet in her house. While relieving herself, she suddenly realized that she didn't feel suffocated. When she read the introduction of her space before, it said that no living being could enter due to the lack of oxygen. But now, she had already entered her space several times without suffocating. After finishing her business, she opened the space setting and saw a new panel appear on the screen. Clicking on the panel, she saw the information on the oxygen level in her space. Another piece of information stated that the oxygen level could be increased by the number of plants planted in her space. Grasslands would automatically produce oxygen, allowing her to stay in her space for a limited time. To increase the oxygen level, she needed to plant more trees or plants. When the oxygen level reached 30%, she could raise animals in her space. The higher the oxygen level, the more living beings could enter and live inside. The moment this thought flashed in her mind, she was overjoyed. Since Jin Zuyan was still waiting for her, she decided to check more of her space settings later and flashed out. Standing not far from her, Jin Zuyan frowned when he didn't hear any sound coming from behind. By right, there should be some water trickling sounds. It wasn't that he was a pervert, but he was worried that his Aitg might be in danger. He wanted to turn around and check on her, but he was also afraid that he would offend the girl and make her angry. So, he could only stare at his shoes anxiously. After several minutes, he finally heard rustling sounds coming from the bushes. The moment he heard this, he heaved a sigh of relief. Unaware that he had been trying to eavesdrop on her doing her business, Zhao Lijai washed her hands and walked out of the bushes. She was shy and didn't dare look at him as she said, "Brother Yan, I'm done." Jin Zuyan knew his limits and pretended to hear nothing. He nodded and said, "Let's go." To avoid embarrassment, Zhao Lijai focused her gaze on the road and missed Jin Zuyan's amused gazes. This time, they didn't plan to use their abilities to fight but use their weapons. Holding her dagger covered with a thin water blade, Zhao Lijai walked toward the warehouse. The moment they got closer, the zombies in the area sniffed their scent. In an instant, they let out excited roars and rushed toward the source of the scent. Roar! Hearing the zombies' roars, Jin Zuyan sheathed his longsword and said, "Aitg, stay close to me." Okay. Not long after, the zombies reached their location. Seeing the incoming sharp claws and bared teeth, Jin Zuyan swung his longsword in a large horizontal arc, beheading several zombies in an instant. Since his longsword was covered in black flames, the moment the zombies were beheaded, their heads and bodies were engulfed by the flames. Unlike when he controlled it, the black flame only reduced the zombies that came in contact with Jin Zuyan's longsword to ashes and didn't spread to other zombies. Roar! The zombies roared as they pounced on him from all directions. Before they could reach him, he bent his knees and leaped into the air. Whoosh, boom. Raising his longsword, he swung it down diagonally. The next moment, the energy wave created from his movement flew toward the crowd of zombies beneath him. With the black flame covering the energy wave, as soon as it hit the zombies, it exploded, and the flames spread to the surrounding ones. Not far from him, Jiao Lijai was no longer surprised by the size of his energy pool. She already had a guess that he was several levels above her. Roar!